When you think of CrossFit, who comes to mind? No one. I think if we truly want to grow, we need to make stars out of individuals.
Jeff Adler, not going to happen with outsiders, though. There's outsiders and there's the inner circle. And John and I are outsiders. We're not in your circle.
Who's the circle? But I think there's a circle, Chris.
The CrossFit brand has value. But what are we doing? We have a few competitions around the world. Why?
What's up, everybody? Appreciate you guys hopping on. We might have had the greatest panel of coaches on today. This is legit. We're super pumped to have everybody on. So first question for you guys. Let's just get right out of the gates. You guys have been coaches for a long time in the CrossFit space. You guys have observed trends. You guys have observed it over time. I would love to hear, how has the CrossFit Games athlete changed? How has the evolution of the CrossFit athlete been over the years? And I would love to hear where you think it's going and then your thoughts on where it's been.
In my opinion, the games athlete is significantly more sophisticated. And what I mean by sophisticated is that they're not concerned about the easy things. Like if we look at technique, they've got their technique fairly locked down. They've got their pacing under control. They're thinking more strategic. They're thinking tactically. They're a competitor. And as a coach, that, you know, and John and I both feel like the sport as coaches has become a lot more challenging because that low-hanging fruit is gone. I mean, the easy days where you can prescribe some, controlling intensity and pacing based upon the time domain of a workout, those days are gone. Everybody understands those basics. And as a coach, finding opportunity for improvement year over year presents a bigger and bigger challenge. And the days of coaching, 5, 10, 15 people at this high level is gone. If you're trying to create value for that athlete, you've got to start narrowing your focus. And that's what I've had to do. I've worked with 55 people at the games in 2015, and now I work with 2.
As Chris said, I think that the depth of athlete has expanded a lot. There's so many athletes now are training full time. The talent pool's got bigger. And also one thing I think that's important to note is now we've got athletes competing at the games who've only done CrossFit for their whole career. Back in the day, a lot of athletes had other sports or came to CrossFit through something else because it was so new. Whereas now, you've got this next generation who've only done CrossFit, only trained CrossFit. And so I think that it just adds a level of depth and expertise they have, even though they're still young. I think there's one important thing to note. And I think something we've been thinking a little bit about is that one aspect of CrossFit is the strength aspect has become so important. A lot of athletes now can't be competitive unless they can lift large loads. Whereas actually, I think one thing that hasn't necessarily evolved in a large way compared to back when Pat was competing and you had the James Fitzgeralds was this conditioning capacity. And I actually think some of these old school athletes would still be competitive, like on a conditioning style workout. However, the strength aspect that these athletes now have is something that has really evolved. I mean, you just need to be incredibly strong to be competitive in the sport.
Yeah, I mean, almost to play devil's advocate to that, though, what I would say is I would almost argue that the thing that separates out the top from the top right now is actually more their and to play, I genuinely, maybe I'm wrong, but is the nuance of their aerobic capacity, like their true endurance, because the game at the top level now is can you be at that peak across 5 days? Can you output in an aerobic ability across those? Because the strength a lot of these athletes have had for, I want to say 10 years now, since 2015. Like you haven't seen the strength numbers increase that much. Like maybe a couple pounds here and there, but what I see from the true greats, the people who are winning, is like the ability to manage energy throughout an entire 5-day event very seamlessly. And I think that to speaking to what Chris said is like the level of nuance down to like, hey, we've got you as a pretty generally good athlete, and most of the athletes are at the relative similar strength level, but that true like subtle endurance do you have across all aspects, not just running, not just like swimming, but like, can you have like all the type of endurance that you need across a 5-day period? And I think that that's the biggest difference is like, if you had a 1-day CrossFit event now versus even 2014, like the Rich Fronings or the Jason Kalipas, these guys, I think they'd still be competitive, but I don't think they'd be competitive across 5 days anymore. Just due to the nature of how much people have excelled at the subtlety of outputting at a high level over and over and over and over again. And I'd say that's the biggest difference from my day. Like, you gave me a 1-day event, I could still compete with all of these guys. Like back when I was fit. You give me a 5-day event, like there's no way. Even at my very fittest, there's no way. These guys are just so refined to their ability to repeat these. And it's become I think at the top level, what I see is the game is, how can you maximize an individual without overdoing it? And that's what the good coaches truly do. And just speaking to what Chris said, like, I think you can only do that across like a couple athletes. You can't do that across 50 athletes, because maximizing volume while minimizing injury, while maximizing capacity is such a subtle game that's what I think I see the coaches at the top really do well. And the athletes at the top really do well too. The ones that don't burn out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But feel free to challenge me on any of that, guys. Like I appreciate back and forth.
I would like to jump back on that, because actually it's been an interesting example, the semis. So we had the 2016 snatch ladder come in from semis, and when you see, which is kind of like a direct strength comparison, and when you see the times from that and the improvements that the athletes have made in that kind of strength event, it's been pretty staggering. I mean, like back in the day, Fraser during that event was like standout, and now many athletes are hitting that same time. A lot of girls have wiped through the floor. So I think like when you take these standalone events over the years, you can actually see that that's like big improvements across that field. And right. One thing I'd be interested to do is then go, okay, let's take a 2016 event that was pure conditioning, and actually, do we see that same trend happening? And this is why it's nice with the repeat workouts like that, because you can see these big fluctuations.
Right. Here's where I would come in and comment is that what we're seeing, though, is the adaptation on the aerobic side that is allowing these athletes to be more successful in overall performance improvement year over year in mixed modality workouts. The training methodology, I mean, at least from what I'm doing, is significantly different in terms of the level of intensity in mixed modality workouts is much more diverse. And so not just in doing like long running. I mean, I think that's something, I mean, shoot, we had Jason Kalipa run 20 miles in 2013. It's not about long running, but it's about mixed modality and about giving athletes muscular endurance, muscular capacity, that ability to lift at not max levels, but take off 20% of the load, take off 40% of the load. They're able to hit velocity numbers because of their ability to manage the volume, because of the way in which they're training. They're not always just doing 1 rep, 3 rep, 5 rep lifting. They're doing a lot lower loads, but a lot higher volumes. Essentially running long, but doing it with weights.
I mean, which arguably you could say is CrossFit. And I would say that it when you look at the basics of how it was programmed initially, that's what it was. That's exactly what it was. There was plenty of days that were endurance lifting sessions, and and I think, to speak to what John was saying, the time that you're getting these athletes who've come in only doing this. So there's far more people who have that kind of endurance. And I think what was interesting is, Chris, you had to come in and lay on that to pre-existing athletes who hadn't spent that time doing that. Whereas I think there's, to speak to what John was saying, far more athletes who've spent more time doing that, who have these, who have the capacity to last across this period of time. And what you were saying, John, like the general level is higher. Like you said, there's more people who hit what Fraser did in across a single strength event, speed wise as well. And that's always going to keep kind of going up, which I love to see, just due to the nature of volume of people doing it and time spent training. But I would just say yeah.
But here's the thing: is like you take a Jeff Adler, right? And the secret's out that he's a decent runner now, and he spends a tremendous amount of time focusing on certain aspects within his running. And we don't need to get into all that detail, but it's when you get to a certain level, you're now in a maintenance mode. And you focus your time, your energy in other areas. And I feel that like you take Gabby McGalla, like she's gotten to the point with her conditioning where she doesn't have to spend as much time. It's more of a maintenance phase. And it allows them much greater latitude to focus on other areas, other weaknesses, other higher opportunities. And so I see that like when you look at the running, in many cases, a lot of athletes, I'm good enough. Like you take Haley Adams, I'm good enough. I don't need to spend much time focusing on it. I need to maintain. And I see that shift occurring a lot. I'm good enough.
Yeah, which should be the case almost like every day with these athletes, or every month, where they go, I'm good enough here, but I'm still getting beat here. What do I do? What do I do with this? Like, I'm good enough at these. Where do I go here? And it almost becomes like, and depending on the athlete, of course, there's always going to be the people who all the raw physicality they need, but then the game is here. And I think that's what you worked a bunch with Adler on too, Chris, was like, hey, here's how you play the game. Because I think that's a huge component. Like there's a lot of raw physiology that exists out there, but a lacking ability to apply that. And it's like, who cares about potential if you can't apply it? And so I think some people are realizing they have I would argue that there's a swath of people who have the raw physiology, but don't play the game as well as they could. And that's correct. I mean,
they just don't know. They don't know. And that's the problem, is that athletes that don't have good coaching, they just don't know, because they're not aware of what the other athlete is aware of. They just haven't been given those insights. One of the things that I would like to get John's perspective on is like this event one that was at semifinals, where you were doing 800-meter runs with 10 clean and jerks and doing multiple rounds. And the clean and jerk weight was not that heavy. It almost tricked the athlete into going faster in that clean and jerk. It was a trap because you were still not able to breathe through it. You were, having to brace and hold your breath, which at the end of those 10 reps, the heart rate soared. And the real question is, how do you focus on your ability to recover after those 10 clean and jerks? Should your focal point be your running, where you can actually recover at a higher velocity on the run? Or is it where you should be focusing on your clean and jerk and doing much more reps, making your clean and jerk workout more aerobically based, where the weight is very low, but the volume is very high, so that essentially what you're doing is working on your ability to clear fatigue, meaning you just get less tired in the 10 reps. And I mean, that's where like coaching, and I'm sure John, he thinks about it, is those nuances matter now. And it's not mattered before.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it comes into the point that you made, that some athletes, they get to a certain level and then they only have to maintain. And so athletes within that workout kind of had to make a choice. Were they able to kind of take it easy on the clean and jerks to save themselves for the running? Or did they actually have to push the pace of the clean and jerks through there in order to get a good time as they go through? And I do think that this is the beauty of CrossFit and the sport that we have, is that, there's workouts that I love and I'm like, okay, I know that this combination is going to be great for me. Like I thought that event one was really cool. I love the workouts. I love the fact that they took it outside for a lot of the semi-finals. I thought it was a really fun race, and just like a classic CrossFit couplet, combining running with barbell. It was just really simple, really nice, and you couldn't be just a good runner to win, and you can't be just good with the barbell. You had to have that kind of classic CrossFit capacity in order to do well there.
Chris, I would say though it would be kind of athlete dependent, right? So if you came and with learning how to navigate that, because you're right, the weight would be relatively light, but if you had, a 170-pound 5'7" guy, or you had a 6 foot 210-pound guy, they're going to have to, in their training, ideally be approaching that exact style workout and navigating their own strengths, right? Like and I think that's where a good coach would create the subtle differences in the program, right? So you would take a 210 6-foot guy who can most likely handle a barbell quite well, and it's just less on their system, even though it is a lighter weight for both of them. Like, you would try to maximize in training that person's ability to push pace on a run, right, and recover from the run and use the run like to be able to push in training, right, on that run and gain something from that. Whereas maybe in training you would take the lighter guy who barbell cycling isn't quite is fine for, but has an easier time running. You would push that barbell cycling time for the stressors and the adaptation required there. But then come game day, you would then, I mean, I personally would look at that, Chris, either way and say, hey, I like, if my size, I would go, I'm going to use this run to recover. So I'm going to run fast, but I'm going to recover on the run. And then I'm going to push pace on cycling through that barbell at a time that I can kind of go through it, but not at a pace that's going to make it so I can't recover on the run. So my training leading up to that should have been something that would allow me to do that to maximize my own physiology. So I think that's where a great coach would in training look at their athlete and be like, well, this athlete needs more here or needs more here.
But this is where I'm saying that as coaching, we have to be a lot more sophisticated, because I think you got to look at both. So if I was looking at you, Pat, is there a way in which I can train you so that you're less fatigued doing those 10 clean and jerks? And the answer is yes. I mean, it's the same thing for anything. If we're getting fatigued because of the intensity, right? In this case, it would be the load that we're lifting and the frequency of the lifts. Is there a way in which we can train so that you're not so fatigued by doing it? And what you would do is focus on the recovery side of the equation. So if you take a look at lactate threshold, your maximum sustainable intensity, you accumulate fatigue above the line, you clear fatigue below the line. It's the same thing in running. If you're always running fast, then you get good at running fast. You get good at the ability to tolerate that acidity and keep the muscles firing so they don't shut down. But you eventually can't just shove more intensity in. You've got to focus on the clearance and the recovery. And right. So the way I would look at it, Pat, with you is, you know what, you're going to move through those clean and jerks, but I have to train you so that when you do those 10, you're able to clear fatigue at a faster rate while doing them, so that your net heart rate isn't as high when you're done with them. Because if it's not as high, it's easier for you to transition into that movement of running, right? You can't just keep taking and borrowing from that high heart rate. You're going to have to give it back at some point. And so the goal is, can I get you to maintain existing velocity, right, to get them done in the same amount of time with less overall fatigue? And the way to do that is by training the recovery side of the equation, no different than what you would do with some type of run, row, ski, bike type movement.
Sure. But you would also want to be able to, I mean, the other factor would be the mechanics with which you lifted that load. If there's an inefficiency there, it's ratcheting up any sort of physiology required for maintaining a lower heart rate. And then sure. I guess the other argument would be too, like if we're that subtle, then the goal would be to make it so things like that would be less would elevate us less, right? So like and so we would train in such a way that not just prioritize the recovery, but we'd have to be pushing that threshold of what gets us there. Like when you look at the top athletes, they're outputting less energy doing the same work because they're more fit. And like that's the design of the training. So I agree, like in terms of absolutely, we should look to in training be able to maximize recovery to hit the same thing and flush the system. And that's so detailed. And like we said in the beginning, that's why you can only work with 2 fucking athletes and do and make it work.
Athletes at the highest level are doing clean and jerks with PVC pipes.
Yeah.
I mean,
and making them look gorgeous. Like that's the thing is like, there's no wasted effort. Like that's what blows my mind is when I see an athlete at the top who's got inefficient mechanics, it's so confusing to me. I'm like, how, like, imagine if you could move well. Like, imagine if you didn't have to use the extra energy to do that. Like, you could be so much better. Like, this is wild. Like, and I bet you watch it all the time in running, Chris, where you see someone's running mechanics and you're like, the amount of energy you're using to move across that period of time is ridiculous. I cannot believe someone hasn't been like, hey, we're going to spend 6 months doing this and you're going to get, so every step is this much more effortless. It's wild to me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what John and I struggle with as coaches is you can't help everybody. And it's none of your business when you see somebody that has these fundamental flaws. Right. I mean, the shame is like, if John got a hold of them or if I got a hold of them, it's like, we're going to help you maximize your ability in the limited time that you're going to be a competitor, because that's going to end someday. And the shame is like what John sees, what I see. If an athlete doesn't ask for this help and they're not associated with us, unfortunately, they're never going to maximize their ability. And that window of greatness will disappear. And that's the hardest thing, I think, as a coach, when you can't say anything. And that greatness will end someday for that athlete. And what a shame that they'll look back on their career and say, I could have been better if I only knew. And that's a hard thing that John and I mean, it's, you see it and you got it. Like the number one pet peeve, people don't set up their bike seat at the proper height. How do you not know? But I'm not going to say, it's not my role.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. This is a podcaster's dream. I just give you guys a runway and you guys just cook, which is awesome. I'm going to throw another wrench into the mix here with another listener question.
In basketball, fans attempt to measure the evolution of the new stars by asking the question, how would prime Michael Jordan hold up in today's game? I would love to hear your perspective on the evolution of the modern day CrossFit athlete by hearing your perspective of how prime Rich Froning would hold up in the modern day CrossFit games.
I worked with Rich from 2014, November of 14 until he retired. And Rich Froning is a specimen. He is a true anomaly in what his abilities are. And if anybody is confused by what I'm saying, he last year did the Leadville 100 mountain bike race, Colorado. It's called the Race Across the Sky. And the goal is to do that in 12 hours. And that, for a mountain biker, you get a special prize because it's so hard to do. Now, you got to remember, Rich Froning, when you do at altitude and you do all the elevation changes on a mountain bike, weight matters. So weighing 200 pounds, that's an issue, because in cycling, your power output, your strength to weight ratio, it matters, or your wattage to weight ratio matters. Rich didn't just do 12 hours. He smashed it by going, I forget what he went, 9.5 hours. I got to look it up. But cyclists, my friends in the cycling community and in the triathlon community, saw that result and were absolutely blown away by his ability as a cyclist, not as a CrossFit athlete, but as a cyclist. And you know how much time he spent on that? 6 months. So to answer, in my opinion, on that question, a Rich Froning is infinitely adaptable. He is that skilled. I mean, this is a guy that loved playing the sport of baseball and blew his arm out pitching and couldn't pitch with his right hand. So he spent 6 months learning and teaching how to pitch with the left arm. And you today would have no idea that he wasn't right or left-handed. He could throw a baseball with equal velocity and skill with the left arm as the right. Now, who can do that? Rich Froning is the only person that I've ever come across that is that gifted if he applies himself.
I'll jump. I'm a big Froning fan as well. You know, he's like, you've got certain legends of the sport, and I think Rich really moved the sport forward. I think one thing framing the question that's a bit different in CrossFit is the sport evolves so much. You know, take basketball, you've got a similar set of rules that have existed for the whole duration. The one thing in CrossFit is that, you know, if you were to take Rich Froning when he was competitive and put him in now, there's been so many changes that it wouldn't necessarily be a fair comparison. However, I would say that if Rich, you know, was young in the sport and grew up with it, like 100%. I mean, I think that those are the battles that people want to see. Like, you know, we saw like kind of the end of his individual career and the Fraser at the beginning, but seeing two greats of the sport throw down, compete against each other, and really see who's the best would have been exciting. But, you know, no doubt, as Chris has alluded to, Rich is a specimen of a human. He's great to watch, and there's no question that he'd do well. Would he be the best? That would be, you know, kind of an interesting question that everyone would like to know, I suppose.
Yeah.
I also look at his genetics. So genetics really do play a factor. And obviously he's able to demonstrate his strength, but your true limitation is your aerobic capacity, your ability to move and utilize oxygen. And Rich had one of the highest VO2 max scores that I've ever seen. The only one higher than him that I've ever come across, and I've seen hundreds of them from elite athletes, is Jeff Adler. That's it. And that aerobic capacity, your VO2 max, is a ceiling. It's your upper level. The question is how much of that ceiling can you leverage? And that's where your maximum sustainable pace comes in. Rich Froning, what he never did when competing was tap into the full potential of that aerobic capacity. It wasn't really part of the sport yet. And what I mean by that is people are now focusing on it with this zone 2 training. I mean, zone 2 training has been around forever, but it's only now being discussed within the sport. Rich Froning was doing zone 2 work back in 2015, but he never spent the amount of time that the current athletes are doing it. It just, the sport wasn't there yet. So imagine if Rich Froning was going to go out and fully leverage that aerobic capacity.
Yeah, I think genetics play a huge role. He has a prime genetic specimen, but he also was a perfect marrying between that and work ethic, as well as game ability. He was one of my favorite gamers. So it was like you had this so take Jason Kaliper, for instance. He had work ethic and he had physiology. He was not a gamer. He was not good at gaming. He was not good at playing other people. So he was never going to be like a Rich. So Rich had kind of all three components. I would almost say similar to a guy like Matt Fraser, who also really enjoyed gaming, had an amazing physiology, and his work ethic was insane. So you're like, holy crap, this is wild. And similar to like you look at Adler. Adler has the physiology, crazy work ethic, and he's learning to game. And like that was his big growth was in that gaming space and playing other people. So I would say that because he naturally had all three, he would be competitive in today's day and age, for sure. Even without any other training, I think you throw him into these things, because we even never saw him truly tap into his full potential. Like there was plenty of, like most of the time you watched him work out, he was chilling. He was well below his threshold. He was just beating the people around him that he needed to beat. And I watched that firsthand all the time. The fucker was chewing gum while he's midway through the games. Like he's just like sitting there smacking gum, like looking around, watching the person next to him, staying right with him, and then being like, oh yeah, we're right here. Let me just beat you in the final 30 seconds of this workout. Like the reason that he would get to, the end of the weekend and win all the workouts on the last day was because he was 10 times more fresh than everybody else, because he knew energy management to a T. He knew how to play the game. He knew where he could push, where he could pull back. And I think that if he was in today's day and age, he would realize that some more time needed to be spent in the areas that Chris is talking about. And he would play that game to spend a bit more time there. And he would be as competitive as you could be. Would he win? Who knows? We'll never know. But I think he was a pretty wonderful combination of the things needed to excel in this, both physiologically, psychologically, and then also kind of the game part of it, which is the psychological piece too.
Yeah, he did. I'm going to tell a story about that. So with Khalipa in 2013, Khalipa comes onto the scene and in the first two events, row and dominate, right? That's the half marathon row. And then they had that burden run event, wins that, established himself as his running is dramatically improved and really took the screws to Froning. Jay had a massive lead. And then they announced that event, that Naughty Nancy event, which was, I think, 25 overhead squats and then a 600-meter run that in Carson went up the stairwell. And imagine Rich Froning is like trying to figure out Khalipa. Rich is way down on points. Rich gets ahead of Jason in the overhead squats. Jason is literally on his shoulders. They go up the stairwell and they're heading up and they're halfway up the stairs. And Jason can easily just go around Rich if he wanted to on the stairwell, but he's not. He's following Rich as they're kind of jogging up the steps. Rich, this is how good he was. It was one of the most impressive things, because who do you think is in charge within that workout in that moment? And Rich was the person that always wanted to know who's the alpha male. So what Rich did was he stops and starts walking on the stairwell. And what he was looking back at was, what was Jason going to do? Jason, as soon as he saw Rich walk, Jason walked.
Yeah.
As soon as Jason walked, Rich sees that and immediately starts running again.
Yeah.
Rich found out that Jason was a follower. If Jason was a true leader, a true champion in that moment, he would have just gone right around him. And that's not what popped into Jason's mind. And right then, as Jason's coach, I was like, that's a problem. That is huge trouble, right? Because in Jason's mind, right, his subconscious, that's who he sees him as.
Yeah.
Rich was the king.
Yeah. I mean, you watch that with Frazier too, even in like the year that it was like the COVID games, and it was like there was the really sprinty workout with Noah Olson where they're pushing the things back and forth. Noah was the funniest one to watch Matt Frazier play. Matt would just God, he just played him like a fiddle. Like, I love Noah, like big puppy dog dude, but I just watched Matt sit. He would just ride him and just like be like, I'm just going to sit. So he would do the reverse. He would sit just behind him. And then slowly increase his pace. So Noah would keep pushing and then just be like, sorry, I've been going like half pace this whole time, and just beat him. It was like, just, you watch it all the time. And I think that's what those top people, they do well, and they enjoy. Like, I think they genuinely enjoy the sport of it. Like, it was like that to me is where the game comes in. It's like it's energy management. Yeah. Like, at the top level, it's energy management. Do you have the raw capacity? And then can you play the psychology of the day, the workout? Like, can you look at the length of the weekend and know where you can push and pull based off of your current state in life? Like, and that's what coaches like you two really help the top athletes do, is be like, hey, let's look at the bigger picture. Let's look at your people. And then they get to go out and execute. And it's just so fun to watch.
Definitely 100%. And the next one, which I got for you guys, is watching the semis this year. I spent a lot of time looking through the comment section. So I had the chance to be at home, look through it, and look through the comments, which is a very depressing place for CrossFit, by the way.
I was going to say, I'm so sorry. Don't. Yeah. I can't believe you took the time to do so.
I know. So if anybody is out there and never watched CrossFit in person, go watch it in person. Don't look at the comment section. Not a good representation of where we are in the sport.
So sad. It's so sad.
Don't look at the comment
So-
section for anything on the internet. Like, why would you go to the comments for anything? Like, just a general rule of thumb. It's a terrible idea.
I know, but these people that are making money off of the sport of CrossFit, and yet they're backstabbing it. It's. I was in Carson, and Pat, it was really, really, really sad that Heidi and I were there, and it was a minute before the final heat of men in one of the events, and we're sitting outside of the venue, and we're like, oh my God, the heat's about to start. 1 minute. We literally run down, and we could sit in the front row behind lane 5.
Yeah.
There's that few people. I'm really, it was really sad to see, but
I wonder too, Chris, we can pinpoint CrossFit and we can pinpoint like live events and stuff too, but like, have you seen what's happening in Hollywood right now? Like you go to watch this Furiosa movie, $180 million movie, really highly rated and reviewed. It had like a $30 million box office opening, like nothing. So I think there's something beyond just the CrossFit space has some stuff going on, but like, I think it's also bigger than that. Like, I think that the world is in a very interesting place. So I think we just keep doing what we can do to promote the people we can promote and love on the people who need love. Like that's all we can do right now.
I wish there was more positivity in the space.
I know.
It's really remarkable what's being done. I mean, John, you think about it. Every moment of every day, all we're trying to do is help people. Yeah. That's it. I mean, at the end of the day, we're genuinely trying to help people, make them better versions of themselves. See what we see out of them, and the undercurrents. I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I went back to a video from 2015 at the tennis stadium. When you see how full, people couldn't get into the tennis stadium in 2015. Like that's why they had to look for bigger venues and stuff. It was just the energy, there was just a lot of momentum at that time, and it was really nice to feel. And I think all of us are here talking because we do see a big potential in the sport. We see the excitement, watching the final event of semifinals this year with all the changes on the points, the dropping the dumbbells. It's a really exciting sport to watch and follow. And I think if it's managed well, it has great potential.
Mm-hmm. I got a perfect segue for that. So this Sunday, Dave Castro did his weekly in review, and there was a part of there that I clipped that I found pretty interesting. I'm going to read it out there. So it's about five minutes into the thing. He says, beginning programmers or event programmers who have little experience will try and make the actual workout the storyline, and reducing it back to its core and simplifying it and letting the athletes and their performance on their floor actually be the storyline is actually a good way to approach event programming. People want to wow the fans and the athletes with their grand loose layout, and this grand loose program actually just core classic CrossFit gives athletes the beautiful canvas to express their abilities. So the way I look at the CrossFit games, and from a naive media perspective, we'll take it on that side. I kind of wish we saw more people at these in-person events. I wish we saw more people online. I wish we had more eyes on this. And if I were to go at it from a naive media perspective, I would wish that the events were almost like watching a movie, where when you watch this event, you come in, you're so excited and you watch these that people just want to run and see that. When, we talk to some of our audience who are not into CrossFit and we say, hey, why aren't you interested in watching the games? They say it's just not interesting. And now the other side is, well, we're solving to find the fittest human on earth. We're not solving for attention, right? And there is that kind of divide in that give and take there. But I was wondering, as coaches who program and study this program at such like a detailed level, do you ever think there's going to be a way in the middle we could find a way to get more eyes on this, tying into what Dave said, tying into essentially what people are asking? Is there a way we could get a little bit more divide between like, hey, maybe we can incorporate more media business aspects at the same time, also find the fittest guy on earth? Or I would love to hear your guys' perspective on that.
I think they serve the same purpose. Like the solution actually is the same for both. We've spoken about it quite a lot, but I do think there needs to be a bit of a season change, because what happens right now, we have open quarterfinals, semifinals games, and really everything starts in March. You've got online stages, and it's 3 weeks, boom. within this 3 weeks, like 80 athletes all of a sudden just qualified for the games, and it's really hard to follow their story. And then you have the games, and then it's all over again for months until we get to semifinals, basically. And I think that if you can create a storyline throughout the year that builds excitement with athletes qualifying, telling their stories a bit more individually, and then you get to this pinnacle event, which is the games, it lends its, I mean, it's not like a revolutionary idea. Many sports follow this structure who are super successful, and I wonder why it can't be implemented in CrossFit.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
Yeah, I think that I don't think that's the program's role, but the program can help. I think the programming can give you, especially if it's explained very clearly and we're showing the larger picture, the programming can make things, really exciting. But I don't think that should be the focus of the program. I think what needs to shift is the coverage of it all and how the story is told. And you can do that through a single event in programming. I think that's what Dave was alluding to, is saying like the programming doesn't need to be crazy for people to understand. I mean, for people to get excitement out of it. In fact, I would say that really over the top programming makes it much harder to pay attention to what's going on. The simpler things are easier to grasp. But I think that we do have a hurdle of making the actual visualization of this process enjoyable. And just like you said, John, if we spread out the season and we told stories and we did it like the Formula One style, where there's famous people in the space and there's stories being told on a weekly basis, and that we're building the rivalries and we're making it much more about the experience of it all, people would invest in that. I think inherently our community knows the pain that people are going through in any individual workout, so they can relate to it, but it's hard to understand that from the outside looking in. So it needs to become much more about the stories of the people. And I think like that was a missing point in CrossFit as a larger picture. Is like when you think of CrossFit, who comes to mind? No one. Like there's nobody has a person representation of CrossFit. It's like this monolith of a company, or maybe the games come to mind, or maybe if you're kind of into it, Dave Castro comes to mind, or maybe like there's no face you put to the name. Whereas I think if we were to make CrossFit more popular globally, it would be like, let's get some people who, when someone says the word CrossFit, their face pops into their head. Like a spokesperson who's like really inspiring and really like can go on Oprah and talk about it, and can hop on Joe Rogan and really quickly speak about it. And like, that builds a hype around how awesome this stuff is. Because we have those individual stories, but as a corporation, we don't like, there's no, like, who is CrossFit? Like there's no one and I think but there's which is wild to me. I mean, like for lack of, I think for a while Rich was a fantastic ambassador, but he was just one side of it. He was just the games. Like I think there needs to be a letting go of the reins of like, let's promote some people, like some good people who can talk well and speak in front of large audiences and get their face speaking about the nuances of the competition, of the in-community stuff, of the program itself, of the like, and none of this infighting bullshit where we let guys like Andrew Hiller dictate the narrative of what our community is. It's like, what are we doing? Like, what? Come on! Like, let's put a face to this name, because there's so many of us in there who would do so. Like when you hear Chris talk about how much he cares about athletes, I don't care what type of a sport like you're following. You're like, this coach gives a shit. Oh, and look at his passion and blah blah blah. Like, I want to pay attention to that. What is that? If we told that story over and over and over again and built people up, I guess the disadvantage is you then pass power off to those people. So as
there you go. That's the problem right there.
And I think that and there's benefits to that in the sense that they're their own beings, but there's also disadvantage to that because sometimes people say dumb stuff or go awry and do things. But I think if we truly want to grow, we need to make stars out of individuals on the front end CrossFit side and the competitor side, like Jeff Adler.
That will never. But
Jeff
it's not
Adler,
going to happen with outsiders, though. There's outsiders and there's the inner circle. And John and I are outsiders. We're not in your circle. And you're who's the
circle? But I think there's a circle, Chris. But I don't think. But they don't have. but they don't. But are they doing? There's no. I mean, there might be an inner circle privately, but there's no like inner circle publicly. What I'm saying is like, what if
it's not?
And I think there should be. There should be a forward facing, like, this is who CrossFit is. Like, these are the people. And like, I either hate this person or I love this person or I blah, like, it should be a reality TV show, like, in that way. Like, let's build some transparency to the fun of this. And like, I just don't think that there's people who have the vision to do that right now. But it's so easy.
Where? The vision where, though? See, you have to realize
both places. Let's start with the competitive side, because that's easy. You've got semi-stars in their own right? And their coaches. Like, each camp has their own following to some degree already. Very easily, just naturally, organically. Then you just inflate that. You just blast it. You just build the story around it. You sit and you film for a month with Jeff, and you make 3 videos out of a month of filming. Those would be fucking fantastic videos. The weird little comments that Jeff makes, you would be like, what is this dude? Like, and I want to know more. Like, did he really just say that? What was that? Like, and then his banter with his wife and the whole thing. It's like, these stories are there. It's just a matter of investing in them. And I think that would do wonders for the sport. I don't think it has much to do with the programming, but that whole thing is where I think we need to head. Maybe I'm wrong, John.
I completely agree with you. I think it's, I have these conversations a lot with a lot of people, and I find it sad to see that the sport is not living up to the potential that I believe it can live up to. And I think, one of the sad things is that the vision from the people in charge doesn't necessarily reflect like a long path forward, like, how can we really grow this sport? How can we really grow this space? And I think there's a lot of people, like, Chris has been involved so many years, Pat, you've been involved so many years with so many great ideas, and actually there's a lot of cohesiveness in these ideas between all these different people, and we agree on certain key aspects. The trouble is they don't seem to make their way through to what actually happens and what ends up happening. And I find that quite sad, because we can all sit here and, Pat, we don't speak offline, but we can have this conversation and all of a sudden we agree. Chris, I completely agree with his ideas. So it's like we've got these 3 different entities agreeing with each other, but for some reason we can't translate that message through and kind of make things happen in that way. And that's what I find frustrating.
Yep.
Well, but
our voices don't matter.
Well, it would matter if you made your own platform, right? So and that's but that's what I'm saying. Like, so take an Andrew Hiller, right? So what he's done really well is he's been loud with his opinion, and he's put himself out there. He sits down every day and he films and he looks for content and he does the thing, and he takes it on himself to get his noise out there. And that's what he does really well. And I'm sitting here bitching, but I don't do that. Like, if I truly wanted it to be different, if I truly had, like, I could make that push, right? Like, but hold on. What I would say though is it would make more sense for it to come from somewhere else, but like, we could do those things. It's just, I don't know if we have the bandwidth to do so.
John's one of the most important coaches in Europe. And is he brought in to get his voice heard within HQ? Because you're saying about creating a different platform. What I'm saying is, why isn't John Singleton within the CrossFit HQ platform, especially when there's European-based competitions? Because he's been around for over 10 years. He's worked with the best of the best. Why don't we want to hear his voice, what he says, and do it within the HQ platform? And the problem is because he's not part of that group. And he's always going to be looked upon as an outsider, yet he's one of the key figures that moves the needle. And that's what I'm saying.
What group are you talking about?
He shouldn't have to do his own platform.
What I'm saying is, I don't think there's a group. I think there's a fictitious group that you're pretending exists. There's nobody that's like this core group who's like master puppeting things. I think it's less organized than that, bro. Chris, I have worked for this company. Well, I've been with CrossFit for 20 years, and I've watched and in the last in watching the changes over the last 7. Like I don't think I genuinely, Chris, it's far less exclusive and inclusive than you think. I think it's
Where's the chat? Because I'm going to send you a code and you're going to
a code.
Because I don't want this. Yeah, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know, but that's what I'm saying. They don't
There you
listen.
go. Did they listen to you? Yeah. Now, did they listen to you?
They didn't. But that's my point. But I even look at that and I go, dude, because like the wild thing is like I think that there's been so much turmoil in the last like 7 years. Like there's been so much upheaval.
I want to hear what John says because he's on the pulse in Europe, and Europe is the fastest growing region.
Totally.
And I would love for him to be on the broadcast. I want to hear what he has to say. I would love to have more awareness of his ideas. Where does he see the growth?
Sure.
But because he's not in the group,
I don't think there's a group. That's what I'm saying. There's no group. There's no group of people. I think it's literally that anamorphous where it's like you've got like Dave, Adrian, and who else?
You're in the inner circle. I don't know.
I'm not in the inner circle. Like that's what I'm trying to tell you. I don't think there's a circle. It might be a line. You've got Dave and Adrian, and they're like.
Well, let me put this question to you then, Pat, because you've got great ideas about the sport. Evolving around media and how they can not just the sport, but the whole entity that is CrossFit.
Sure.
And you feel that these ideas could help the space grow.
Mm-hmm.
So. What do you do with these ideas? Do you take them to anyone? Do you speak to anyone?
I tell them to Don every time I talk to him. So I've got a direct line of communication to Don because I'm a level 1 staff member and he often drops into stuff. Don's a great dude. Like I've never had a bad interaction with him. He seems quite honest from every interaction I've had with him. And every time I can, I pose my ideas for it. And I'm a loud one. Like I'm exceptionally loud in these circles. And just
there
because
is a circle then.
Well,
come on, Pat. What's the next question?
We have these company-wide meetings, right? Where it'll be like they'll bring on all the level 1 staff, and they'll be like, "All right, guys, any questions?" And you'll have 100 people in these are staff members. Where I'm a W-2 member, but there's no an hourly rate for teaching seminars, so I'm not like brought into that. But I'm like the only one who raises my hand, and I'll put my hand up and be like, "Hey, why don't we do this?" And I do it all the time, as often as I can. And there's been some ideas that have been taken up, some that have been taken up and credited to elsewhere. One recently that I got through was I suggested that there be a geolocation tag on the app for anytime someone searches CrossFit, it tags where they're at and suggests 3 gyms in their area. That now exists in the CrossFit app. And I'm like, cool, that's awesome. Like something I said worked. But again, I think that there's so much turmoil internally. And there's a lack of stability that it's not as nefarious as it seems. I think the neglect is more unintentional than intentional. And that's all I'm posing. Because I'm the same, dude. I just happen to live close to Dawn, and it's like I'm not the pestering one to be there.
Well, my question to you then, Pat, would be what do you think? First of all, do you think there should be change? And if so, what should that change be?
In which side of the company?
I think in general, and I think actually the side, actually is a general for the entity, because right now there's sport is included with affiliation, with education, all of those things. So I think just more as a general question. I think,
I kind of expressed what I think would be the largest, needle mover for CrossFit as a whole. And I think that that's putting a face to the name and putting a group of people forward facing on giant platforms that are not from within our own ecosystem. So like all of the communication that we do is via the CrossFit Instagram account or the CrossFit YouTube channel, which are massive channels, by the way. Like the Instagram account has 1.5 million followers or whatever it is. Like these are massive channels that they could easily put media out on. But I think there needs to be somebody who is CrossFit, somebody who you think of who people would follow, because I think that would move the needle the most in getting people on board and more media attention. Like you could bring out outside media in if you had these faces. So like on the competitive side, I think we need to make stars out of these people. And I don't think it would be too hard, but those are the changes I would see. I think unfortunately you're handcuffed by finances to some degree. They're beholden to investors who have now bought into this company. And there is a reality to that they're not making money. I mean, they were transparent with the losses they had this last year, which I thought was huge. I got to be like, everyone's been like, you're making all this money. And it's like, let me show you the books. This is how we're not making money. And I think that was huge. And then they did some things to mitigate that. But then it just needs to be people in charge who understand or have a vision for what we want this to be in the future. And I don't know who that is.
Definitely. That makes a lot of sense. It reminds me a lot of tech platforms talking about model citizens. So they talk about how when you launch a new tech platform, a new content platform like an Insta or like a social media, stuff like that, to TikTok, you need to get on and say, I know who the model citizen is, so I know how to act. Right. So you look at that and you say, hey, on Instagram, maybe or when TikTok came out 2020, it's like these like Addison Rae, Charlie D'Amelio. I don't know if you know these guys, but when people got on TikTok, they're like, oh, I know how to act because I see those model citizens. I think that'd be really cool, honestly. I think we came up with some cool ideas there. But we went at this weekend and, the past couple of weeks, a lot of podcasts have been talking about it. I love to bring it up too, which is Don had a chat in Oslo about potentially changing in leadership, CrossFit, getting new leaders. There was a whole thing about that. He sent a email out to affiliates. I didn't get to read that email, just to be completely candid. So if CrossFit did have a change in leadership, I would love to hear. What would you guys like to see as a business perspective, things change in the world?
I can jump. I think the one thing I'd like to see is a collective voice, being able to sit down, have a discussion, and maybe take those ideas in an open, transparent way. I think that'd be something to be really useful to have. As Chris has said, there's lots of people in this sport, in this world now, who not only individually have good ideas, but actually those ideas they're a collective idea now. A lot of people agree on those. So being able to bring a group of people that can, within the space, that can at least have some say, would be something that's really, really nice.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I'm gonna have to pass. It's such a tough. I don't have enough detail. I personally, though, I worked for a company before this, and I quit in 2015. We had 10,000 people, and I ran the sales for the Western U.S. And I that's why it's hard to comment, because I'm perplexed at the difficulty in running a company of this size. Like the infrastructure. I clearly don't have all the details, because it's obviously been riddled with challenges, and
yeah.
I'm perplexed by what those challenges could be when you look at the product offerings. And so that's where it's like, it's hard to say, because it must be significantly more involved and complicated than what we all see. Otherwise, they'd have it sorted out. Has to be.
Yeah,
How many full-time employees are there?
I don't know.
Right, but what?
Not many. I mean, not many
Right,
at all.
so that's my point, is how complicated can it be, knowing that there's, a few dozen.
Yeah,
but it's proven to be highly complex for some reason.
I think there's a lot of emotion in it. And I think part of the thing is there's the people who are very vocal are vocal due to their passion for the service that is being offered, right? So if this were a tech company, it'd be like, yeah, this is my platform that I built. Like, people don't on a fundamental, like they don't on a core identify with this this app they've created. Maybe they do. Maybe there's like one developer's into it, but you've got a swath of people. You've got 15,000 individual affiliate holders, or 13,000, whatever it is, that are very opinionated about and passionate about the actual thing that they're doing. So there's so much noise that any decision is going to be fought over, right? Any decision is going to be certain things. So I think part of it too is like, they bought. I like the analogy. They bought CrossFit thinking they were buying the Pirates of the Caribbean like Disney ride, and instead they actually bought a real pirate ship. And they were like,
But hold on. The new owners bought it during COVID. There was no due diligence. They bought it
no,
where there was no affiliate fees being paid. There was no seminars being done. You couldn't audit anything. They paid $200 million sight unseen. They weren't buying any franchise. They were buying it based upon speculation.
I know.
Right. So there's no, it's to say that it's Pirates of the Caribbean, it's some franchise. I'm not buying it. I think that they bought it.
No. I'm saying I think they bought it thinking it was a different business.
Maybe, but that's where we don't know. I mean, that's where I'm saying some complexity is in here that we don't understand, because it shouldn't be this complicated. I will add, I mean, let's turn it around, make it positive. I ran into Dave Castro in Carson on Friday, the first day, and just talking to him about the events and just the programming piece and what his, what was he doing there? He's doing, like, he was in the CrossFit booth at the time, and he said he's only going to come to one day. And I said, well, what is it that you look for in the day? And he said, inspiration. What I see is nuances, the way in which athletes are moving and their opportunity to maybe create a different type of a test to create opportunity for a new direction in terms of fitness in the sport. But he's also like going there to get ideas on flow of workouts, what worked, what didn't work, and the spectacle of it. And I found that really appealing, that he was there doing his job to really highlight and create workouts for the games that is appealing not only for the coaches, right, and next generation ideas and concepts of unknown and unknowable, but also what athletes are doing and not doing, but also the fan, the spectator experience of making it a show. And that really appealed to me. And he said, I don't need to oversaturate it. I'm just coming in for a day, getting these thoughts together, and then I'm going to go back and write. There's a guy that loves his job. He gets it. He really gets it. He wants to create something of value, not just for the coaches and the athletes, but the fan, the spectator.
Well, it has to be thought of through that lens, right? Because if you're not,
that's why he's there. That's why he's there. That's my point. Yeah. Like, he's there doing his job, and he wants to be great at it. Now, if Dave's doing his part, what about the rest of the people?
Again, I think it's a smaller team than you think.
I don't know, Pat. You're in the inner circle. I don't know.
You keep saying that. That's so funny.
I mean, John, are you on seminar staff? How often do you call Don?
I think I think you make a very valuable point in the sense that
love you too, Chris.
We don't know what we don't know, and that is the crux, And I think the point being that I'm sure if it was a simple solution, it would have been fixed. There's probably some complexity to the scenario that from the outside looks easier. And obviously, I have my biases and how I'd like things to go and like things to see. But I think it's sometimes hard because we don't know what's actually under the hood or what's happening or whatever the analogy may be.
Yeah. That was one of my big things because I've chatted with Don a few times now, and that was one of the big things because I taught his level 2. And so he came to a level 2 and I taught him through that. And we sat down at lunch and we were chatting, and I was like, hey, just, one of the things I think would help a ton is just transparency. Like, I know, like, I think when you buy a tech company, you don't really need to be particularly transparent about what's going on because no one truly cares. They're there to do their job and fill out that spreadsheet. But you've got a lot of people on both sides of this, the affiliate side and the sports side, who deeply care. And if you're transparent about what's behind the curtain, they'll be like, and it's like they can't build this big boogeyman up in their head. Like, even like what you're saying, like this inner circle, it's like if you were transparent with it, no, you wouldn't say that because they'd be like, there's 3 people who are sitting in a room talking. Okay, they've got like 8 other jobs. Cool. All right. Well, that makes sense why stuff's not happening here. And I think that was what I would personally change is continuing to be transparent about stuff like that.
I would say like Dave's week in review is part of that transparency. Like, just hearing like what a random comment about whatever it may be, and Dave just answering it is
Yep.
is amazing, because actually it's like a lot of transparency in that thought process, in that
Yep.
discussion, and him opening up in that way has been really nice.
Yep.
Yep.
I agree. I like that a lot.
Cool.
Also,
Definitely.
if you were wondering, Yash, the actual quote in Oslo got taken way out of. He gave his generic answer to the "Will there ever be a change of ownership?" And Don said, "Yeah, at some point, but there's no thoughts of that right now." And
Right,
somehow that
right.
got taken into being like CrossFit selling. But I was like, what? Like,
Yeah, I remember that. Did you get the email, Pat? Did you get the receiving end of that email that he sent out afterwards to clarify?
I got one that was sent over to the seminar staff, and I loved the
Okay.
title of it. The title of the email he sent was Chatter. And I was like, yes. Like, I actually wanted to reply back and be like, fantastic email title. Because I've heard him give his response to that, like a few times, where it's like, yeah, dude, they're an investment company, and that they're eventually going to want to sell, but they have no intention within a foreseeable future to do so. And they're probably going to hold it longer than the classic thing, so they can get a better return on their investment. And we need to figure out ways to do that, because making money and treating the community right don't need to be mutually exclusive. They can happen together. Like, it 100% can happen together on both the competition side and the affiliate side. And yeah, so and in terms of investing, they're actually the group that was a part of it they let Don make decisions. Like they're less aggressive than many other things, but it's Berkshire. I mean, it's pretty well known. The company Berkshire.
Obviously, I mean, yeah.
Well, I'm glad to teach you that today, Chris.
I got something from you, Pat. Thank you.
First time.
Boy,
That's awesome.
I miss our days on the track, Pat.
Dude, I miss spending time with you, but those days on the track were some of the more miserable days of my life physiologically. Those were so hard. That is just not where I excel, but I loved it.
Yeah. No, you were a good complainer.
Complaining. Love complaining. Are you sure, Chris? I don't think this is the right pace. Chris, this is not the right pace.
Boy. The best was when Pat does a mile for time and I have to stop him 200 meters in because he's way off pace.
Way too slow.
This is
That's
how
what
I
it was.
do it. If I don't go out fast, I don't get a good time. Okay. All right.
That's funny. And so I wanted to bring up one that we chatted about last time, Chris. At the very end of the pod, Pat and John weren't here for this, but you put out a really cool idea that actually went viral on social media after for us, where you proposed the idea that what if it wasn't in the best interest for CrossFit to run the CrossFit Games versus more of a flagship program like the Ironmans do, and instead focus that attention on supporting the affiliates more. It's been about a year now. I was wondering, has your opinion on that changed? And I would love to hear John and Pat's thought on it too.
Look, so when I was coaching and I was doing it, for the first 3 years in CrossFit, I coached for free, everybody. I mean, Pat's never paid me a penny. And I had a full-time job at the same time. And it felt like I was doing a great job at both of them. I felt like I was able to manage both. But what I realized is that each time when I went from my day job to coaching, there was a transition, there was a lag where I had to get up to speed, but I felt like I got up to full speed. But when I left in my job and I just coached full time, I realized that I was only partially getting up to speed because I was distracted. There was always other thoughts that I had to manage in parallel while coaching. And they were always taking up some of my capacity, right? Because that's where I was earning my living from. As soon as I quit my regular job, it opened up clarity and it made the vision, the future, much more accessible. The path, the stairs that I needed to take, those steps were much, much brighter. I think that's what's happening within CrossFit. If you take Dave Castro, he is very passionate, and that's why I brought up that last piece. He's very involved, but he still has to deal with what we said earlier, which is CrossFit's not making any money. Imagine if Dave is just working competitions and creating value within the competition. And what that includes is we need the public to recognize who the players are. We need to create backstories. We need to create these personalized approaches so people can actually gravitate towards one fan or another. I mean, a games athlete. I think that that's the key, splintering it off and treating it truly like a business. A lot of people are getting confused by the affiliate, the education, and then they throw in the games piece there. I think by separating it, we'll have much better clarity. And I think that you will see a much greater feeder system into the affiliates by doing this. That's in my opinion. And let's face it, I see that in terms of the sponsorship side too, that sponsors are now clearly focused on the competition side. There's no ambiguity in them and the affiliates or education where their contribution gets watered down.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're running it like an investment, split it off and either have the investors participate in that, because look what Iron Man did. I mean, anybody could look up from when Iron Man was sold by Valerie Silk for $10 million, and then, it's sold 10 years later for $560 million. And they really leveraged the brand. The CrossFit brand has value. Mm-hmm. But what are we doing? We have a few competitions around the world. Why?
Go for it, John.
So I really think that there are some great examples in the sporting world. Like Iron Man is one of those big success stories, and I think that one thing that's been interesting over the last few years is seeing something like Hyrox come into play. Chris and I saw each other in Germany not so long ago. The Hyrox World Championships is happening next week. And one thing that's been interesting for me observing that is they've never been scared of promoting the sport of Hyrox. And actually, because they're promoting the sport and growing the sport, you're getting this natural boom in affiliate growth, in participation. And Hyrox also have all these wonderful stories of people completing their first Hyrox race, people getting fitter and better, just because, honestly, that's like the nature of sport. When people do sport, it brings a community together. People get fitter, people get healthier. And I think that there's a lot... I'm all in on the belief that if the sport of CrossFit grows, then actually that will benefit education, that will benefit affiliation. And I've always really struggled as why that has never been understood by the people leading that charge. Mm-hmm. And so I think that, I agree with Chris that actually something needs to be done with the sport to improve it. This is like a fundamental thing, but I believe the sport can be improved, then every other aspect of the business can be improved. And therefore maybe, licensing it away, but with the understanding that actually if this external group or whatever it may be that's focused on the sport will have a beneficial relationship for affiliation, for education. But yes, I think no matter the solution, our sport needs to be improved.
For sure. I think Hyrox is an interesting example because it's kind of where CrossFit was at 15 years ago. They're in a stage of growth where people hear the name and they're like, what's that? And then they see the events and they're like, oh, that looks like fun. I might try it. CrossFit's been around a significantly longer time, and I think it's dealing with a very different set of not problems, but a different set of factors when it comes to continued growth in what we do. Because we're not the new kid on the block anymore. People like the new kid on the block stuff. They like for better or worse, people have an idea of what CrossFit is to some degree. To your original question, whether or not the company could be split and there could be something that focuses solely on the CrossFit Games and solely on the other side, I think narrowing the focus of any group of people is going to allow them to maximize their capacity in that area. So I would say that's great. I mean, I don't see any reason, because I think people they were falling into these two camps where it's like, we have to promote CrossFit Games constantly, or we shouldn't promote it at all. It's so different than affiliates. And I'm like, those are two extremes. Like, why not? It's not hard to be like, hey, this is the CrossFit Games. This is like, if we were to compare cycling, like you wouldn't look at the Tour de France and be like, that's cycling. You'd be like, well, That's the elite of the elite in cycling. And here's what cycling looks like for most of us. And it's not a hard message to disperse. So I don't think there's any reason that we can't talk about both. But I agree, growing the CrossFit Games will grow affiliates. And they did know that for a long time. We had a whole media team. That's all they did was grow the CrossFit Games for years, right? In these glory days you guys are talking about, that led to more people going into CrossFit gyms. And I think there's maybe some old patterns around what the CrossFit Games are and how it all sits that might need to be broken in order for us to move forward as a company. But we're at a very different place. I mean, like Hyrox, for instance, last year, yeah, they're up and coming. 125,000 people did Hyrox. We had 340,000 people compete in the Open. It's like it's just a different size and place in their timeline.
No, Pat. They're in Europe. They're pulling 14,000 people for one event. They're climbing, and I think that John brings up something very interesting. Like Hyrox, there is a massive attraction for CrossFit affiliates to become a Hyrox affiliate. And one of the reasons why, and you can't deny the movement is occurring. It's happening at a rapid rate. And these CrossFit affiliates are paying to become a Hyrox affiliate. And the reason why is because Hyrox does a phenomenal job at their events. If you do one, you are guaranteed going to do another one. And so affiliates are recognizing that if you have a member that signs up for a Hyrox event, they're going to stay a member for at least another 6 months. Retention. Mm-hmm. And what I see, like what John brings up, is here, that's an opportunity. But does CrossFit see that as an opportunity as a feeder system? Are we, for example, CrossFit, and having an affiliate booth from the country manager within these Hyrox locations? Like in London, 15,000 people. They were running heats for 48 hours every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Do we have a booth there to cross-pollinate? Or are they a competitor? Are they a threat?
I don't think they're a threat at all. I mean, that'd be like thinking that. Well, I mean, it's just like any of the other stuff that they've kind of dabbled in, like Tough Mudders or Spartan races, or it falls into a similar category of like, these are accessible to the masses and are great feeder systems for everything that we do.
That's right. But is it being done?
I will, because I think this is interesting. Like, for example, in the Middle East, there's been lots of de-affiliation of CrossFit gyms, and they have all moved over to Hyrox for some of the political statements that were made. And so, there is a legitimate business threat, and I think it's actually currently a threat because the opportunity is not being used to maximize it. And I actually don't necessarily think that just because it's the new kid on the block, it's doing well. It's not like someone just started it's new piece. I believe that they've made good decisions in order to get to this place. It's got huge growth in Asia right now. And that's an area that CrossFit has always struggled to grow in. And I think it's because of decisions that have been made, like good decisions about leveraging what it is that they do. And I think that CrossFit can also make good decisions in order to gain that opportunity. Like Hyrox started from a guy, it's a CrossFit workout. They just standardized a CrossFit workout. That's the workout, and they've just popularized it. I have no doubt that if CrossFit held kind of similar events that were accessible to that many people, that people would love it, and people would go in their tens of thousands to those live events. Mm-hmm. And you brought up the Open analogy. So CrossFit had 300,000 people sign up to the Open. That's an online competition. Hyrox this year is expected to get close to that number, like 275,000 people going to live events. Mm-hmm. And that, I think that distinction is like, okay, you're signing up to, you're paying $20 to do a workout in your gym. Whereas actually these like 275,000 athletes are paying a lot more money going to a live event. And there's something very powerful in that movement.
Well, I wouldn't doubt that there's something very powerful in that movement, John, but I mean, I didn't say that because they're the new kid on the block, that's why they're successful, but that is definitely part of their success. We're in a day and age where if you do something that catches fire like that, and it speaks to a certain type of person, there's going to have an initial run of success. Look at the Orange Theories of the world. Look at the F45s. Look at the things that have happened. Like you look at Peloton. Look, if you in a day and age where people are looking to do something that speaks to them, like they'll have initial large runs of success. And we are 100% at the beginning of the Hyrox. I mean, it's titled a sport for everyone. Like that is significantly more inclusive than how we speak about the sport of CrossFit, right? The sport of CrossFit is the elite of the elite.
But CrossFit was this whole idea of CrossFit was this infinitely scalable.
The whole idea was CrossFit was to make you more fit than any other program that exists. So I think that's where one of the distinctions that's hard is that the methodology of CrossFit is to take any individual and make them the best version of themselves when it comes to capacity. The sport of CrossFit is to find the dominant athlete in a set of athletes, the person who is physiologically more capable than the rest in across the spectrum of fitness. So what I would agree with, and what I think is a fantastic statement, is that they have a standardized thing with Hyrox. People know what they're getting into, and it's set as like, hey, here's what you're going to do. Like, it's just a CrossFit workout, but it's the same one. And it's like, yeah, if we had a standardized CrossFit set of events that we ran across different places around the world, and we're like, this is a CrossFit, like the CrossFit Saturday, and there's like 3 events or whatever it is, or 2 events. Like, I think you could absolutely run with a cool program like that. The hard part is then we go, okay, well, but CrossFit's not that. CrossFit is actually everything, and this is just one small component of it. So how do we navigate the language of then, okay, well then now you come to the gym and you do everything, not just these things, but these are a good representation of this component of what we do. Fuck. And then so there's it's messier when you have a methodology framework, whereas Hyrox is not a methodology. I mean, maybe it is to some degree, but their main thing is this event. They're training for a specific thing, which inevitably allows us to psychologically approach it in an easier way. It's the same thing as training for a marathon or training for an Ironman or training for whatever it is. It's specific to the thing. It's far less nebulous. And that has been, for the lay person, a hard thing to grasp a hold of what CrossFit is. Remember when like you first did it and someone asks you, hey, what's this thing? And you're like, it's shit. Unless you're 20 years deep and can articulate the nuance to the person you're talking to about what CrossFit is, it's hard to get that message across. So I understand some of the hurdles that we face on our side of making it an event that people just want to jump in and be a part of on a weekend thing, that they can read one thing and be like, oh, I get the events. Here we go. Let's go do it. But I'm not saying we shouldn't learn from all that. I'm not saying, I think I love what you're saying, Chris. You pop a booth at each one of these events of like, this is CrossFit affiliate. Like, why are we not collaborating with them more? And I think we do. Like the Hyrox boys were right next door at when I was in, what's it called? Miami. The Hyrox guys were like right next door, and we chatted for a long time. Like there's a ton of CrossFitters that are over there. And I think I would hope that our liaisons from within our company are chatting with them to figure out how we could do something together. Cause that, too. Yeah. But I'm not part of that inner line.
But I also think, though, the same thing where fitness trade shows.
For sure.
Are we there? Are we at Ironman events?
For sure.
I mean, that's where it's like, where are we driving new traffic? And like you mentioned, Tough Mudder and Spartan.
It'd be such a no-brainer. It'd be such a no-brainer to just like, but you'd have to put unique individuals there, like I could show up at one of those and have my little booth and be like, yeah, come on over, let's chat. Like you want to know what we do here. But
let's face it, you get a guy like John, he could look at the Hyrox movements, he could look at the structure of them and come up with a training protocol. It's not
for
complicated.
Sure.
Any level 1 person should be able to sit in a booth, or the country manager, and be able to represent the product and showcase how CrossFit can help you train for all of the obstacles.
I mean, that's a fantastic idea. I think why don't we have somebody at each one of these places have Like we can we could write those. That's not hard, and have them sit as like generic things that fit into different categories and be like, hey, come up, chat. Like, you want to get better at this? Let me show you. Here's a customized plan for you. Give me your body weight. Give me your stuff. Let's like check some times here. Cool. This is your custom plan. It's free. There's
that work will never come from a John or myself, because we would never be asked. It's going to come from the people that already provide the programming in your circle.
Yeah, but I don't like who provides the programming in our circle. But who does that? That's what I'm saying, Chris. Chris, I ran the first affiliate programming company ever in CrossFit. And I've never been talked to about programming for CrossFit.com or anything like that.
No, I know, but that's my point. If we're trying to build the affiliates within CrossFit, then why not offer that type of a programming piece to the CrossFit gyms?
I think they're kind of trying. Like, that's what CAP is trying to do right now. They're having more and more successes, and I work with affiliates. So like, I'm not jaded because I work with really good affiliates.
I mean, my point is John, do you get any inquiries from helping people in Hyrox?
Yeah, we are inundated.
Okay,
with,
and me too.
Hyrox.
Me too. I mean, I've been improved with the Hyrox aerobic capacity course. I'm part of wrote content for their level 1. We've been on this for well over a year and a half, 2 years. Where is CAP? How is it that we're so? But my point is, how is it so slow to react when the people like John and myself have been out there for 2 years and we're inundated? And yet this is news. That's my point. That's my point. These things, this low-hanging fruit is sitting there, and I'm sure things are being looked at. But like John just said, I'm being inundated. Me too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there's definitely a size difference between you two and CrossFit in terms of the organization. So in terms of moving and pace of change, it's just going to be fundamentally different. There's also
John, have you ever received a call from HQ to find out what you know about Hyrox?
Well, but that's what I'm saying is, who would call? Like, I don't even know who would call you. Like, I don't know what component of the organization would be like, let me reach out to John and Chris, because I don't know. There's got to be some marketing or outreach but like, I couldn't tell you, man. I think, hey, that's a good point. Like, the country managers, have they looked at the influencers, for lack of a better term for you two, like the faces of the sport in those areas to drive traffic to the affiliate?
I will say this. So we're obviously based in Spain, and I have a great relationship with like the guys who organize CrossFit España, with Nat, with Danny. They're great guys, and we do have conversations. One of our troubles is we're not in the US, and there does seem to be a bit of a distinction, unfortunately, for the European side doesn't necessarily have that same momentum. I mean, everything happens in the US. Like, especially if you look at employees, the bases, all of those things, there's no European headquarters or whatever it may be here. And as Chris said, we have the number of affiliates we have here. We started this like hashtag years ago of Europe is coming, and it kind of became like a bit of a joke around it now, because it's like we've been here for so many years, but still there's lack of presence in Europe.
Yeah. I fundamentally agree with both of the things, all what you guys are saying. Like, I don't know what those gears look like. And
Me neither.
And I think that, I don't weigh myself down with thinking about it too much, because my role, I'm not in the competitive side like you guys are. I'm in the affiliate side. And I just deal with affiliates, and I just work with affiliates who really want to be better. And I am profoundly grateful for the people that I work with, because all we do is make people have success, and it's fucking great. And because all they're doing is using the basic methodology of CrossFit to change the lives of the people who walk through the door and enjoy that process and make money off of it. So it's like, I have this weird, like, tight demographic of like, I work for the larger company teaching level 1s and trying to involve myself as much as I can and mentoring the seminar staff. But when it comes to sales and bringing in new people through that vein, I don't do it. Through individual like gyms, absolutely. Like, I appreciate that, and that's all I work with. So
I mean, but Pat, that we do the same thing. John and I are in the gyms doing educational content all the time.
For sure. Absolutely. But not at the intimate level that I do, I don't think. You guys are relatively niche with your focus, and I love that. And I think it's amazing. But we literally are hand in hand, because I work for Best Hour of their day, and the company is incredible. Like the people who work with it. But like there's some basic things that I would love more affiliates to open up. And I would also love more people to go into affiliates. But like with where CrossFit sits in the ecosystem, people get enough traffic just via Google searches to their gym to have a profoundly successful business. Just via basic Google searches. They don't need to do any other marketing other than just track Google searches for their stuff and handle the emails that come through that in order to grow at like a 3 to 4 member per month sort of thing, and over time be a quite successful business. But there's profoundly broken businesses within this that we help people solve some holes. So I love the idea of getting more leads. I love all that kind of stuff, but I kind of work on the end of like, we already have these broken businesses. How do we fix it so like you don't have holes in your bucket? It doesn't matter how much more water you put into a holy bucket. It's if there's holes, it's just going to keep dumping out. And I think that's where I've found value. And if I was on your end of guys, like where I was like constantly digging into that space, it would be hard. So I can't imagine. It must be frustrating, is what I'm saying, being where you two are at.
Wait, I'm confused. Why is it frustrating for me?
Because you see so much potential for there to be such growth in the area that you're working, that it almost seems like such no-brainers to be like, look, guys, like we're here, we're having these conversations. Like this is, and I see it too, but I don't actually work there. I don't actually.
I think it's coming though from the passion of the sport, and that
totally.
We want the sport to be successful. It's not about seeing, it's these things that seem obvious. And we would love to be able to help and be able to provide our input, to provide our what we're seeing, what we're hearing. The fact that we've been in Hyrox for well over 2 years, that says something. We're out there, and I mean, John and we have to make a living by doing those things.
Yeah.
And Pat, you know it. I don't make a single penny off of any games athlete ever. I mean, I just spent $2,000 going to semifinals East, and I made no money. It was all just pure expense. I make money on the education, and that's supporting the affiliates, it's supporting the coaches. But yeah. I also, overall, number one is keep CrossFit successful, keep it alive.
Yeah.
And that's the driving force. I mean, we're all passionate about the sport.
Totally.
Yeah. So I don't want you to think like it's not my mine is never driven. I love working with elite athletes because it's a passion of mine.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't pay any bills directly.
No, I was more speaking to the frustration because like I can feel it. Like it's like, why the fuck is this not happening? But I'm not my brain's a bit more like an Etch-a-Sketch. It's like I draw this picture of like, oh man, this is really frustrating. And then I go, and then I don't think about it again. And I just focus on my task. It's a really weird, and I would just, if you were ever dwelling in it, just know there is also a core demographic of people really continuing to thrive within this space. It was just really rejuvenating for me because I for a long time was dealing with people who were struggling and not seeing successes over and over again. And then there's been this upheaval within the space with the corporation changing and all that kind of stuff. So dust is still settling. I have high hopes. I think Hyrox is cool. I think all these things are cool. I think Orange Theory is cool. I think F45 is cool. I think all of the stuff in the space is rad. It's just a matter of how can we align ourselves in a way to just be like, hey, let's do this stuff. Let's do it together. Let's get 100 million people doing this. Because I still believe that you want to get better at Hyrox, you want to have more fun at Orange Theory, you want to like do all these other things. CrossFit's going to be the best program for you. And a good CrossFit gym with good coaches is going to be the best thing long-term for your health. Not for your 6 months from now Hyrox thing, but forever. Like you want to keep being capable. You want to, dude, we just had this guy in our group today. We talk about our successes every day in our coaches group because we do these coaching development. And his win for the day was he had a 70-year-old member who's been training with him for 6 years. And he's like, I've been training with you so that I can spend the rest of my life sailing around the world on my sailboat. And I now feel competent and capable enough through the training I've been doing with you to spend the rest of my life traveling around the world on my sailboat. So he's about to kick off and go sail around the world. And it's like, that's why we do this. Like, I don't do it so that I can be better at CrossFit. I do it for the other stuff. But there's a side of this that can leverage that and leverage attention in a way that other sides can't, which is the sports side. The sports side can leverage that and bring people in a way that you see through Hyrox, that you see through Tough Mudder, that brings them in as like, hey, let's look at this surface level thing, but check out what's beneath it. Because what's beneath our program is so deep. That's what's rad. Like the tip of the iceberg is one thing. Can we maximize that to get out there more? And because the depth is insane. Anyway.
I just want to say I 100% agree, Pat. I think that's very true. And we're all passionate about the methodology. And I think we all agree that the CrossFit methodology and what Greg started is something extremely special. And there's no doubt in that.
Yeah. 100%. We just went full circle. We wrapped it right up. So I want to be respectful of you guys' time. We're nearing the end. Right before we get out, I would love to hear where people could find you, any projects you got going on, anything you want to plug in.
Well, you can find me at aerobiccapacity.com, same Instagram page. Like I said, we just formalized our arrangement with Hyrox, so we're going to be doing more Hyrox aerobic capacity courses, very different than the aerobic capacity course that we do within the CrossFit space. Yeah, go to the website and just keep checking, but we're going to be populating those seminars soon.
If you just search for the program without an A, we should come up. If they auto-correct you, just take the A out again and we'll be there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You can find me at Coach Pat Barber on Instagram. But the thing that I've been really passionate about recently is I started something called the Fathers Guild, which is all about looking at fatherhood through the lens of just wanting to be better at this task. And if you want to see stuff I'm passionate about, that's my jam right now, and I really enjoy it. So also, you can find me at The Knowledge by besthouroftheirday.com. I do coaching development. We have an app. It's super great. And I wanted to get it to a place where I could actually bring really awesome people in like Chris. I initially started to do it with Chris in the very beginning, and I was like, this app is not where it needs to be for Chris. So now it's at a place where I think I might be able to bring Chris in.
Bang.
Hey, John too. John, I would love to bring you in. The reason I was saying that is I actually had a preset conversation with Chris where we had talked about getting in there.
Yes, you sure did.
But it was right in the beginning, and I dropped the ball completely. It was 100% on me, and my life imploded. But John, I would be honored if you came into the app and did some coaching development stuff in your expertise, which would be fantastic.
No, and I've, as I said at the start, I've always been a long-term fan. Ever since watching you at Lake Tahoe.
Boy. Wow, that's taking it back.
I put myself on the line in that event. It was fun. It was so fun. I think I had more fun than
honestly,
anyone.
We talk about media. Those were some of the best days.
But that's what I'm saying.
Throwing down.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, how easy was that? You rent a couple mansions.
Yeah, it was awesome.
You pit people against each other. You build characters out of them. It was one weekend, and people still talk about that. Like, that's not hard. Like,
and you want to know something interesting? Because I rewatched them a few years ago. But actually, some of the time, you don't see any of the event.
Yeah.
It just pops up the result at the end.
Yeah.
Because people didn't really care about the event. It was just like a super fun seeing all of you guys like interact, throw down.
So fun. And doing it was amazing. What if we had really wealthy people buy stables of athletes and train them up? And it would be like what's it called? Soccer teams. You know, like where the soccer teams are owned and then they're like local to that area. So like we get these camps around the world that are owned by these really wealthy people who fund them. And then we create these soccer team camps, and then they go and they compete in the games and crush each other. I'm in. Let's do that. Okay. Who's the wealthy? You guys know any rich people? And you can do. I'll join yours, John. Don't worry. I got you out in Spain there.
Wow. Pat, you're so good.
I'm gonna have Ryan Reynolds buy mine. Ryan Reynolds and that guy from It's Always Sunny. They're gonna buy mine.
All right, well, let's call it there. We'll appreciate you guys coming. I know we put out a really sick conversation. I'm excited for people to hear this.